Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming today. I'm like super excited, but here's the thing about my job. I pretty much get to chase people I really admire around, ask them to do stuff for me, and somehow it always works together in the end. So, and Ryan is a great example of that. Like I chased him for like since we were kids. No, I'm kidding. Ryan, I like there's not much point in me introducing you because I think you are going to say some stuff that we really need to hear. And yeah, and afterwards we're going to have some lunch. So please feel free to join us. The chat is closed and if we have time for Q&A, we will. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this space live in person, and welcome to all that are here virtually. We're just going to get the slides set up because they'll help me stay on track. I can rant and rave in many different directions, but today what I've been asked to talk to you about is reconciliation. And we are nearly 10 years into the reconciliation project here in Canada. And I think it's time for us in this country to take a look at where we've been over the last 10 years and where we might be going. I think that in this place, in this country, we have come a long way in a short amount of time. We have managed to accomplish some great things in the spirit of reconciliation, but I still think that most Canadians, and in fact, I would bet all of the money I have, which isn't a lot of money, but it's enough to say that I would bet that most Canadians don't think about reconciliation, and most Canadians haven't heard of reconciliation. And for those of us that are in the project, and for those of us that are committed to the idea of something better in this country, that seems shocking to hear. Like, how could it be that after 10 years, most Canadians don't give a thought to reconciliation? It's categorically true. There are polls that have been done in this spirit. And I think that where reconciliation is found often are in educational spaces and institutional spaces. But those spaces are limited, right? For those students that are in here, you're going to learn a little bit about Indigenous people in this country. You're going to learn a little bit about the history. You're going to learn a little bit about some of the buzzwords and things associated with those buzzwords, treaties. You're going to learn about First Nations. You're going to learn about residential schools. And all of these things are important in the canon of what we should be talking about. But deepening and broadening our knowledge and our understanding of the story of this place, I think is fundamental to the project of doing better for Indigenous people in this country in the spirit of reconciliation. This is me. I used to look like that, and now I look like this, tired and chubby. I've got 4 kids, and they've run my life. So now I look like this. I live in Hamilton, Ontario. I'm Anishinaabe, originally from a small community called Couchiching First Nation, which is in northwestern Ontario. And for those of us that are familiar with the map of Canada, maps are a thing that used to be printed on paper. Most of us don't deal with paper anymore. But I'm on the border of Manitoba, Minnesota, and Ontario, right in the corner there. Half my family is from Minnesota. Half of my family is from Ontario. And so we come from a small place called Rainy Lake, or Couchiching. And in our language, Couchiching talks about the area of a lake where it narrows into a river. And that's where my people are from. So I was born and raised on a lake, lived my whole life with my family on the shores of Rainy Lake. We are hunters, we are fishermen. My grandmother was a trapper. My grandmother's family on my dad's side lived and worked with the land. They were fishermen as well, farmers. And so my people, where I'm from in northwestern Ontario, have been there for somewhere close to 9,000 years. When a gold mine was opened in my territory in order for the corporation New Gold to get the mining license to operate in our territory, they had to do all sorts of different environmental assessments and different archaeological digs of the territory in the area to look to see if they were disrupting anything of historical significance. And the archaeological digs and the environmental assessments came back and discovered proof and evidence of life, Anishinaabe life in our territory some 9,000 years ago. And so this idea that Canada is a young country because Canada just a few years ago turned 150 years old, we kind of laugh at the notion that this is this newfound place, when in fact Indigenous people have been here what we call since time immemorial, meaning forever, meaning thousands and thousands of years ago, meaning since before the pyramids, meaning since before the asteroids hit the earth and killed all the dinosaurs. Like, we believe that we have stories about how, you know, the dinosaurs were the homies, you know, but not really, because they could kill us. So we hunted dinosaurs. Anyway, we're not talking about hunting dinosaurs today. Sorry to disappoint the chat on Zoom. I told you, this is what this slide deck is for, to keep me on track. Today, I'm going to share a lot of stories, because to me, the beautiful thing about making space to listen, to learn about each other, is that stories are the quickest way forward for us. Politics, politicians, I mean, I don't care which way anybody votes. You should vote, right? Because this is a country that we're allowed to, and we set our own political agendas here, and we engage in ideas and thoughts and processes that serve all of us. Hopefully the best of, that our politics can. But politics is not going to save us. It doesn't matter who the prime minister is. It doesn't matter who sets the Indigenous agenda on reconciliation. It's not politics, laws, or legislation that'll bring us forward. It's us. It's us. It's the people. It's us sharing food together. Joan, thank you for the feast. A round of applause for Joan and everyone at Niche. Because when you share food, then people are energized and excited and motivated. Some of us are tired and napping because you had too much fry bread, but that's on you. And sharing food together brings us closer. It's the most human thing we can do together. It doesn't matter where you come from in this world. To share food is really special. To sit across from each other and to share a plate of food and to learn is really, really important. And so for me, story invokes spirit. It invokes a good sense of self. And really, for me, spirit is our life, right? Our set of experiences that we get here on this earth walk help us engage in a life of memories, of kindness, of gentleness, of compassion, and the impact we can make on each other in good spirit is really, really important. And so for me, life is just one big story. And the more we share our stories, the further we go together. There we go. We have a lot of stories in Anishinaabe Aki, where I come from. And the story that I want to share with you to start with today is the story that we call the basket full of stars. And so you'll hear this term, what a coincidence. People will say, oh man, it was such a coincidence. This and this happened. Or people will say, oh man, I'm having deja vu. You know what deja vu is? You've heard the term deja vu. Man, I'm having this wild deja vu. And for us as Ojibwe people, as Anishinaabe people, we don't believe in coincidence or deja vu. What we believe is that when we are lowered here from the star people, where all of our spirits live, before we travel down here for our earth walk as babies to live our life on this earth with our families, that when we're up there, we are being prepared by our clans. We're being prepared by the animals, by the spirits, by our ancestors to be lowered down here to walk. And before that happens, we as little star people, little star spirits, we are shown what we call the basket full of stars. And in this birch bark basket, our entire lives are presented to us. And we look down as spirits and we see inside of this birch bark basket, and we see all the good, we see all the bad, we see all the love, we see all the divorces, we see no laughs. All right, that's fine. That's a cheap joke. But we see everything presented in front of us. And what we do when we agree to come here is we take a look at that basket full of stars and we examine where we are going to go and the life we are going to live. And when you agree to it, it's only then that creator and our clan systems, our spirit helpers, help us make that journey down here. And so when you have deja vu, when you go, oh man, what a coincidence, there's no coincidence and there's no deja vu. It's your spirit recognizing that you've already agreed to be here. You've already agreed to do the thing you're doing when you have the deja vu. In other words, it means you're exactly where you are meant to be. You're exactly where you are supposed to be. You are on your path. And what reconciliation demands of all of us is that we are on this path to try to understand where this country has been and where it is going. And that path, each and every one of us, is different, right? Because we all come from different walks of life. Some of us come from different parts of the world, but we're here now. And so recognizing that your path might intersect with this work differently is really, really important. Because we're, as I said in the beginning, we are nearly 10 years into this reconciliation project in this country. And I would say, just by show of hands, and Zoom, I'm sorry that you can't participate, but if you want to put up your hands on Zoom, I can't see you, just do it anyway. Who feels in the reconciliation project right now today, and there's no shame in admitting this, who feels stuck? Who feels like maybe we've peaked a little bit and you're not quite sure what is next? By show of hands. Many of us, right? Many of us that have committed to this idea of, well, yeah, I can get down with doing better. How's Zoom looking? Some people, yeah, lots of people putting up their hands. Because we committed to this some 10 years ago and we thought, well, yeah, okay, well, it makes sense that we need to do better by our Indigenous relatives that are here. I can get down with that. And the first couple of years of reconciliation, man, it was like a newfound love. You know, the puppy love. The first time you fall in love in high school, you're going for lunch together. Oh my God, we're going to McDonald's to share fries. And then you're going to hang out after school. I'm so shy. I'm so in love. That was us in the early days of reconciliation. We couldn't get enough of each other. It was like, I bought all the books. I went and saw A Tribe Called Red down at the Danforth. I mean, I bought Tanya Talaga's book and I saw her at Walmart one time. It was amazing. We couldn't get enough of each other in this country. And it was alluring, right? It was contagious because the idea that something good could happen was right in front of us. And something good did happen. Right? The world learned the truth about this place. Our residential school survivors that are still with us today felt seen and heard, at least some of them did. That we committed to through our politics, through our educational systems, through some of our institutions, we agreed that we are going to try to do something better. That's good. But at the time, some of us, me, were standing in the back of the room going like, wait, guys, are we sure we're doing it right? Because if we don't do it right, we're not going to get a do-over. Like, we're not going to go, okay, we got to try again. Everyone stop. Put your reconciliation handbooks down. Step away from the handbooks. Step away. We got to try this again because we got it wrong. And some of us that were critical of reconciliation, I was called anti-reconciliation. I was called anti-Canadian, anti-Indigenous. But my idea was not that reconciliation was bad or that it shouldn't happen. Of course, we can talk about it. We can create projects and programs and art projects and all sorts of different things to encourage thinking about reconciliation. But to me, the project was so much more. We had to undo the actual harms that were done. So if colonization was the poison that got us here, we had to work on decolonizing. We had to look at what this word actually meant to think about how we frame what happened through the project of reconciliation. And that's why we're stuck. Because we became really good at making the lists of the bad things that happened. Residential schools, the 60s scoop. We made a list. And most of us that were in the project memorized the list. And we could sit around at dinner dates and dinner tables, and we could sit around with our colleagues and use the list and sound pretty smart. And that list is important. Do not get it twisted. I'm telling you, the list is important. But without contextualizing the actual human experience behind that list, we are robbing ourselves and each other of actually creating systemic change, of actually digging down into the roots of what it is that has happened. This is why we are stuck, because reconciliation became a recolonization project. It's like, well, we checked that box, we did it. Let's keep it moving because I got stuff to do. I got places to be. I got programs to run. We got laws and legislation to pass, baby. Let's go. The politics are over. And reconciliation, in essence, has become, in my mind, a recolonization project, because what does it do, right? We've stopped considering other and better, and we think we know what is happening. And even the efforts that we try to participate in, and I'm not speaking about this organization, but I'm speaking generally, absent our Indigenous people, absent our residential school survivors themselves, absent our 60 Scoop survivors themselves, absent our young people that have lived this violent experience here on Turtle Island, where they've been robbed of their autonomy, right? And so reconciliation is easy for a lot of people that participate in it because we are able to distance ourselves from it. It's why the reserve system in Canada was so brilliant. In the earliest days of this country, before Confederation, the project was, let's forcefully remove the Indigenous people from their traditional lands and territories, AKA all the like nice waterfront and beaches that we love to enjoy too, back before a bunch of people took them from us. Well, you think Ojibways didn't like to lay out on the beach? We love laying out on the beach. Tell me the last time you saw an Ojibwe lying on a beach. Rarely happens. But the project was to move us out of our traditional territories where we lived, our summer camps, our winter camps, our fall camps, our spring camps, move us far away onto these reserves. They're literally called reserves, reserved land, far out of the eyes of the settlers that came here to create this country, out of sight, out of mind. If we don't have to see it, we don't have to deal with it. That's how this country was created, through the Indian Reserve System. Right? And we're kind of doing that now. As long as we, oh boy, as long as we really don't have to dig in, we're going to feel okay. And it's hard to dig in. It's hard to really nail down into the root of what it is we're trying to do in any given context, in any given institutional space, organizational space, government space. It is hard work. And so I'm not trying to take shots at anybody saying you should do this or should do that. That's not what this is about. This is about trying to find the one thing you can do and do it to the best of your ability. And what I take my hat off, because I've been here at Niche for a number of months participating in different programs. You're trying to do that. You are creating a context for your community to help people understand this place. You should be commended for that. And it's hard and it's confusing, because everything we've been told about Canada has been one way. And yet here we are as Indigenous people going like, no, you don't get a free pass on this. We got to tell you something different. And it's upsetting. But to the full credit of the leadership at Niche, and to the full credit of Joan Frame, who does chase people around relentlessly across Turtle Island through her academic endeavors, through her professional endeavors, through her personal relationships, Joan Frame sees a shining light and goes, I want to bring that to this community. And to the full credit of this organization, you let her do that. Because a lot of places don't let people do that. And you let people like me and David Strickland in the house. And you open up your doors to the community and to feast. This is change. And that commitment is something that Canada is missing. And this is a unique organization. You have a unique challenge in front of you, right? Welcoming people here into this country. And so what a beautiful welcoming it is if you can offer them just a little bit of perspective about what this place is. You should be commended for that. That to me is the project. It is undoing the harms, decolonization. So if colonization got us here, it's not reconciliation that takes us forward. That might be part of the project. But to me, I've been arguing for decolonization long before reconciliation. This is a road in my territory called Colonization Road. I made a movie called Colonization Road. It's on YouTube. You can find it on CBC Gem. This is Drake hanging out on this sign. He wasn't really there, but I think it's funny. Yeah, I know. After the track, that's right. You know, we got a long way to go. We've got some things that we need to commit to. You know, reconciliation, the big promise. You open up the box, ever sick, not going to happen, right? We look at Indigenous nationhood, the great promise of Canada, the great promise of Justin Trudeau and the federal Liberals. And again, I'm not here to sway anybody's vote or tell you to vote a certain way, but man, as soon as we actually start to really talk about what Indigenous nationhood means in this country, like, no, we're not doing that. We didn't mean it. We didn't. I said it. Okay. So the project, like where we could go, is so beautiful. I argued publicly in Vice magazine that this country could be the most diverse land and territory in the world. So you could go to the Middle East and there's all kinds of languages and cultures and beliefs and religions and governance models and all sorts of different ideas and foods. We have that here, folks. That's what this place is. That's what Canada is. But that's what Canada rejects. Like in high school, a lot of people, when they graduate, they buy a backpack, a train pass for Europe, and they grab some money and they go and they take their break year. They take a year off and they take a train across Europe to go discover themselves and discover the world and eat food and hear languages they don't know and experience things. You can do that here. You can go out to BC and take a train straight across this country. And if we accepted the project of Indigenous nationhood, if we accepted the transformational idea that Indigenous communities and their nations deserve the respect to be autonomous on this land, you could take the train straight across this country and hear languages and eat foods and go to dances and ceremonies and experience worldviews that are diverse, because Indigenous people, we're not a monolith. We're not one thing. I don't look like Phil. Phil doesn't look like me. Well, a little bit. We look a little bit. This, yeah. Well, I wasn't going to say it, but you know. But we're not a monolith, right? We have different teachings, different understandings, different languages. And in this country, in Canada, that diversity is such a great promise. Which brings me to this idea of territorial acknowledgements, right? Is that no matter where you go now across Canada, what we do is we acknowledge the territory that we're gathered on. We make a special acknowledgement of the place, the lands, the waters, the air. We say thank you to this and this people for hosting us. They didn't choose it. They're not hosting y'all. Y'all just are here. So let's be real about that. But the great promise is the fact that there isn't violence in this country between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. That we are here with open arms, as we were at the beginning, to say, welcome, everybody come in. Everybody come in and eat. Everybody come and sit down. Everybody come in and tell their story. Everyone come in and celebrate your faith. Celebrate your ideas. Celebrate your families, your communities. Come here. That's the promise of this. That's the promise my people made in our traditional territory in Treaty 3 in Northwestern Ontario. We said, yeah, come on in. It's for everybody. But that needs to be reciprocal. And so if we're going to acknowledge land, if we're going to acknowledge territory, and we're going to acknowledge that we're on some place that was once Indigenous land and territory, well, we've got to make that mean something in this country outside of this hollow recognition. We've got to look at what it means to be somewhere. If I was at your house, right, I couldn't be like, yo, thanks for letting me be at your house. Now I'm going to go sleep in your bed. Like, I know it's your house. Thanks for letting me have your house. I'm just here, but that's the bed. And like we got to be in good relationship here. We got to figure out what the rules and what reciprocity looks like amongst ourselves and each other in order to be here. And I'm not saying that, like, you know, people need to pay some tax because they're in Canada or anything crazy like that. But what I am saying is that relationships, fundamentally, relationships are going to be at the core of this project, of these next steps. And so why you feel stuck and why many of us feel like we don't know what the answers are, it's because we've not nailed into the relationship piece yet. Some of us have, but generally speaking, we're just not there yet. So for me, this word, biskabiyang, in the Ojibwe language is the closest word I have to what decolonization is by definition. To decolonize through an Anishinaabe framework for me is to return to oneself, to return to yourself, to go back to the way you were pre-colonization. How can I get back to living an Anishinaabe essence and lifestyle on a day-to-day basis? How can I go back to, what does it mean to go back to being Anishinaabe? I mean, I'm wearing dunks, you know, I'm wearing these cool pants. My ancestors wore loincloths. You don't want to see me in a loincloth. So it's not, I'm not talking about like going back to live on a trap line, though some of us want to do that and some of us should be able to do that. What I'm talking about is, what does it mean to be Indigenous in this country today? And how do I return to living, breathing, being an Anishinaabe person? That's the project for me. And if reconciliation is going to allow anything for me and my people, my family, my community, it's going to allow that. And it's not going to get in the way of that anymore. Because Canada, through the decades, has done nothing but got in the way of Indigenous people being ourselves. Yesterday, there was an apology from the Canadian Medical Association, right? Further truth dropped into the middle of the room for everyone to consider. And we've been saying since 2007, 2008, when Stephen Harper first issued the apology in the House of Commons, that, oh boy, if you're serious about learning the truth, man, do we have some things to tell you. And we should get these types of apologies institutionally across the board. Wait until the justice system has to apologize. Wait until the educational system has to apologize. We're talking about every single institutional framework in this country apologizing and laying bare what the truths are. Because we are not yet finished understanding the truth in this country. And so for those of us that kind of felt the urge and the fun and the excitement of reconciliation in its earliest days, because it was new and because it was exciting, the project is just beginning. And the incredible thinker, Murray St. Clair, who's a judge and was the chair of the TRC and everything else, but he's a philosopher. He thinks on different levels. He has this Anishinaabe thought that he can process from his own cultural perspective, but he thinks through the minds of many, many different fields and again, Canadians' experiences. And he says, how can I articulate this in a way that everyone understands? What he said as the TRC was finishing its mandate and its work, he said, we call the strong hearts to the front. And so for those of us with strong hearts, those of us willing to lead, those of us willing to take a risk and to try something different, what Murray was saying was he's calling those strong-hearted people to the front, to try something, to lead, to do something different. And how we continue to move forward is people with strong hearts have to keep coming to the front. So for those of us and some of us that are in this room that feel burnt out, it's because you are. It's because you put your strong heart on the line for a long time and you dragged people with you and you brought sometimes organizations, sometimes coworkers, sometimes families, sometimes communities. You brought people with you and then you get tired. You're human. We're all human. You're going to get tired. So we have to continue calling strong hearts to the front. We have to continue asking people, what's your idea? What do you think we might try? And then you have to commit to something. I'm going to share 7 quick words with you that are often referred to as the 7 grandfather teachings. I don't know where that came from. I've talked to many Ojibways that don't know anything about the 7 grandfather teachings, but it sounds cool. So let's just call them the 7 grandfather teachings. There's 7 words in Ojibwe that are kind of fundamental to our understanding of the world around us, and they're instructive ways for us to live. And I present them, and when I get to the end of it, I'll tell you why I wanted to share these words with you today. Tapwewin, or truth. This is a word that is very, in the English language, I think we can all agree the English language is just a miserable failure of a language. It's just a lazy language. Truth. Well, what does truth mean? Well, it means, it's you tell the truth, you don't lie, you're truthful and honest, and you're telling the truth. Right? In Anishinaabe Moan, we're talking about to speak only to the extent to which you've lived or experienced. That's the truth. So that is my truth is what I'm telling you. This is to the extent to which I've lived or experienced. That is the truth. If we bring that to this work, if you bring your truth to which you have lived or experienced to this work, you will be doing reconciliation correctly. Honesty. Again, we don't have to go through the English translation of this word, but this word is so wonderful, right? It's the way you live in a good way, to live honestly. It's the way we live in relationship. That is the most important thing. So if we try to understand that to live honestly is to move correctly in good relationship, we'll be doing something really great in the name of reconciliation. Humility. The word humility, Debazandiziwin, talks about lowering oneself and not thinking too highly of oneself, so as not to put yourself above others. And so the work of reconciliation does take humility. It takes, for some, admitting that they were wrong. There's a journalist in Winnipeg who used to write for the Winnipeg Sun, who's done incredible damage through their column through decades, spewing racist sentiments, stereotypes, tropes, just lazy, garbage, junk opinion column. Wrote it for years. An infamous right-winger, okay? Who just a couple months ago came forward and wrote a column to apologize and said, I was wrong. We're looking at this wall of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Some of the most vile things he said were about this young woman that are on this column here. And he didn't understand the harms of colonization, and he didn't understand the harms that this place has done to Indigenous people. And in his own learning, he had to create the context for which he could see the whole picture. And I'm not accepting his apology. I don't think anyone really should. It's his journey to walk. But I commend him for publicly apologizing for the harm he did. And it takes a humility to commit to doing something better in this country. We have to respect each other. We have to create an environment that is a respectful environment, right? That considers all opinions. We have a word in the Ojibwe language, nakanige, which means to consider all things before speaking. We sit and we listen, which is hard for me because I'm a stand-up comic. So when I write my material, I write from a reactionary point of view, right? I react to the world and I write. But really, I should be sitting with these ideas and kind of considering all things before I speak. And for me, in being invited into the Ayapahe Society, the Speaker Society out in the Blackfoot Territory in southern Alberta, when I first got invited to Ayapahe, this was the core tenet of what you do. You have to sit and you have to be a listener. To be a speaker is to be a listener. And the more we listen and the more we train ourselves to be respectful in this way, the more we can consider, the more we can understand. We're never done in our life, in our lifetime, listening and learning. It takes bravery and courage, right? To commit to this idea of something better, of something different. Because let's face it, like in this country, right? Generally speaking, many of us are pretty comfortable, right? Many of us generally know where our next meal is coming from. Many of us generally, right, have enough food in our fridge to feed our families, or at least in our community, there we know we can go find food, we can go share food, right? And so to disrupt or to change the balance of your life, it takes an incredible amount of courage and bravery to go like, yeah, I'm going to unsettle myself here a little bit. I'm going to interrupt what I thought I knew. I'm going to change directions or change paths. That takes an incredible amount of courage to do that. One of the most important tenets of the work of reconciliation for me is love. We, as Indigenous people, we are learning to love again. We are learning to understand and wrestle with what it means to love. Because at the heart of the project of colonization in this country, what did Canada and the church do? Is they broke those love bonds between families, right? They took Indigenous children away from their parents and their families, and they put them in schools far, far away. And so in my family, I'll share, my great-grandmother and grandfathers on both my parents' side did not raise my grandparents. And my grandparents did not raise my parents. My parents almost didn't raise me because my parents are drug addicts and alcoholics. In the earliest days of my life, I lived in total chaos for the first 8 years of my life, absolute chaos with drinking and violence and drugs in my home. But my parents went to rehab and they fixed their life. They quit drugs and alcohol. And from that day forward, the project in our family was to learn how to love again because there was so much damage. Intergenerational trauma, right, is what we call it. This intergenerational survivors is what many people call it, though I don't identify as that because I think we need to hold survivors for those that actually survived the abuse, right? Residential school survivors, 60 scoop survivors, these are the survivors. But intergenerational trauma is real. I, with my children, am the first generation in my family since pre-contact to raise my kids unabated, uninterrupted. That's today. My parents went away. My dad went to jail when I was a kid. So I'm the first person of my generation to raise my family without that state interruption. And I'm not a hero. It's like you have kids, you got to raise them. That's the law. But it's a wonderful privilege to try to learn every day more about love than I knew yesterday and to live that way. Because I could wake up every day and before I put my feet on the ground, I could wake up angry. Man, I could wake up pissed off at this country every day. There's something to be mad about. And you can live that way. And I did for a while when I was young. But life is short. And if I believe that story about the basket full of stars, if I believe that I agreed to this earth walk and I've already seen everything I was supposed to see, and now I'm just here living it, I have to believe that. And we have to accept love as the project. And Canadians need to love us. They need to learn to love us, warts and all. But in order to love someone, you have to get to know them. And Canadians need to learn about who we are and why things are tough for some of us. Why some of our relatives do live on the streets with addictions, right? Why some of our relatives can't seem to get up on their feet, no matter what we do to try to help them. Canadians need to understand that. Canadians need to have some empathy and compassion for the story of Indigenous people. We're getting better. We're going to continue to get better. But if reconciliation is worth the project, then it is worth thinking about how we can love more deeply, how we can bring our communities together in a good way. Stuck, I guess we got to talk more about love. And wisdom. This is the last of the 7 words. Wisdom. We need to bring all of those that have come before us with us in this conversation. So I encourage you, all of you watching at home and here, to think about the elders, to think about those that have come before me and how we can bring them into this conversation in a good way. Because those that have walked before me are far wiser, far more articulate. That lived experience piece is important. And our elders can tell you the answers to your questions. It always feels like, oh, I don't know what the answer is. I've got so many questions, but there are no answers. No. Our elders know a lot. And they've lived through something that they need to be able to articulate, right? If sharing story, if the Bajimuanan, to tell stories means that we are going to share, almost think of it as like when I share a story, I rip off a piece of the shirt and I give it to you. And everyone here leaves with a little piece of my shirt, right? That's what we're doing. We're sharing spirit through storytelling. Well, our elders and those survivors that have been impacted through these systems, they will change your life. They will share a piece of their spirit that you will never forget. And it's important that as we set new directions through this project of reconciliation, that we consider their perspectives, because this project really is about putting lives back together for people, right? And those lives that are most deeply impacted are theirs, not mine. We have these words back home, Manitou, Aki, and Acknowledegments. These 3 words together, Manitou, which means spirit, Aki, which means land, and Acknowledegments is a lawful or almost like a legal, if you will, agreement, the law, if you will. Manitou, Aki, and Acknowledegments is, for me as an Anishinaabe person, our instructions for life is to live in good spirit with the land, the territories where we come from, in a lawful, respectful, reciprocal agreement forever. So what do Indigenous people want? What does reconciliation look like possibly for Indigenous people? I believe it is this. It is trying to reconnect to the places we are from, to enrich and to strengthen our spirit so we can rediscover and understand what it means to be in reciprocity with this place once again. Because until we feel okay together, right, until our relationships are strong, I don't know that we're really going to get to the place that we can imagine getting to in this project called reconciliation. Because I don't think we can go there alone. I think we all have to go together. There are some places in this world, Maori land in New Zealand is an example of like that country, you know, everyone speaks Maori, right? When you see a really cool haka being done, right, at the beginning of a rugby match, you see like Indigenous people doing it and white people and Black folks, and you see people from all walks of life doing this celebratory, ceremonial, cultural dance. It's because it's ingrained in the fabric of the place. That could happen here. You know, a few years ago, it was the year of Indigenous languages in this country. And at the time, Indigenous language advocates were pounding down the doors of legislatures all across this country saying like, this is the time, we can do it, we can do it. Because Canada claims that there are 2 official languages here, right? French and English. And why do they do that? How can they get away with that? Well, the answer is, the official answer, you can Google this, the federal government says this, because those were the 2 languages spoken upon Confederation. It's like, what? What about all the indigenous languages that are spoken from coast to coast to coast here? Those were here upon Confederation. We didn't like put them away for a year and then bring them back after. Like they were still being spoken here. And so we can imagine a place where we send our children to school, and depending on which territory and which region where you are geographically, they may learn the indigenous language of that place, right? So bringing us closer together through this project of reciprocity and creating relationships, to me, is fundamental to Manitowoc and Acknowledegments, all of us working together in this spirit, good hearts, good minds, in connection to the places that we all love, the places we are from, in this forever reciprocal agreement. It's called The Secret, right? Someone wrote a book, some lady wrote a book called The Secret, right? You've seen this book, maybe? It's like the second best-selling book on the planet, next to 50 Shades of Grey. Some of you are looking down at your phones. Well, look, I gotta go. We're not going to talk about 50 Shades of Grey, but I'm telling you, it was the second best-selling book on the planet for a number of years, The Secret. It's basically this. They basically stole this idea, this conceptual framework of what goes around comes around. What you put in is what you get out. Karma, we can call it whatever we want. Biskabyung, we can use all cool words and make t-shirts and wear them. Whatever we want to call it, we can call it. But it's this framework. What you put in is what you get out. And we as Indigenous people across Turtle Island, this is a core tenet to our understanding of the world. This is why when people came here and they saw Anishinaabe people moving, we were called nomadic. We were nomads, savage nomads, because we didn't live in one place, because we didn't build giant cathedrals and homes. But instead we moved to, oh, is that where the fish are? We should go live over there because there's fish. That's awesome. And then we'd eat the fish. Oh, is that where all the berries are? Let's go live there. I love berries. And then we go live over there. Oh, where'd the moose go? They're over here. Let's go live over there. We were lazy. We just went to where all the food was. Back to this. Yeah, back to this. We lived in a forever relationship with the land, the waters, and the air, right? That forever relationship meant, yeah, we followed the food, we followed the medicines, we followed the plants. We had these camps. It's the way we governed ourselves. It's the way we practiced trade and economy. It's the way we conducted ourselves amongst each other. We knew that the Haudenosaunee, the Oneidas, we knew that they had their corn over there. So we would bring our trade items down. Before Canada, there was a complex system of governance and economy that long precedes this place. And some of us, want to go back into this space where we can think more deeply about, like, well, how do we get there under capitalism now? Under capitalism, how do we return back to this place? Well, we might not be able to, but we can live in good spirit, Manitou. We can live in good relationship and connection to the places we're from, Aki, land. And we can do so in this reciprocal forever relationship. That to me is the fundamental project. Is how do we live in this reciprocal relationship forever? And committing to that is something special. Because what that means is it's all hands on deck, right? Like we are talking with our children, our grandchildren, right? We're committing to kind of creating these seeds of understanding through multiple generations. That's really special. That's never happened before. That's something that we can start now. Basil Johnston, my favorite, who back in the early 2000s said at an Indigenous language conference at Casino Rama, because that's where we like to hang out. It's at the casinos. The stereotype's true. Sorry, Native people. But Basil Johnston at this, he was in a bit of a debate because Basil Johnston was a writer. He was a language teacher, educator, a bit of a philosopher, right? But he was arguing that, no, you've got to print the language in these books. We got to print the books in our language Because if we don't, how are we going to learn the language? How are we going to speak the language? And people are going like, no, you don't put it in books. People are going to take it. He's like, we want people to take it. That's the point. Can't be hiding these things anymore. The government used to take these things from it. They burned our hand drums before. They put our sacred items in fires. They threw our stuff into the water so we would never see it again. We got to put it out in books. We have to publish this work. And he said this quote, and it's my favorite thing in the world. If I don't have any tattoos, but if I were to get one, I don't know where I'd put it, but this is what I would say. Traditionally, we were a contemporary peoples, meaning Indigenous people. We are not stuck in the past. We don't think, oh, we're going to need to go back to 300 years ago and then, talk to trees and stuff like that. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is we've brought everything we know with us, and we are committed to that for the rest of our lives. But we're going to do it a contemporary way. There's all kinds of different ways in which we are trying to bring the present with us. This is a chat GPT that I am building called Indigenous Story Weaver. And I'm building a GPT so that when people use chat GPT, every new iPhone from iPhone 16 forward is going to use chat GPT to operate their AI. Anytime you want to Google anything Indigenous, I want the Indigenous Story Weaver GPT to answer you and to give you primary source material, fact-based material to correct the record. I'm embracing technology because traditionally we were a contemporary peoples. We want people to have this information. We want to share our stories. We want to share our culture. We want to share our understanding of the world. And so we have to continue to evolve and to change through time. And what we're seeing right now is this great influx of Indigenous music and literature and film and documentary and podcasts and art, because people understand now, well, we just have to keep putting out good. And if enough people find the good, we hope that it changes people's lives and their understanding. All we want for ourselves and each other is Mino Bimadswin, meaning the good life. Mino Bimadswin talks about a journey that we're all on, the journey we agreed to be here. And Mino Bimadswin is not a destination. Like, you don't arrive at a city called Mino Bimadswin, population 250,000. Oh, we made it to Mino Bimadswin. It's a spiritual journey. It's a philosophical journey. It's an educational journey. The journey to Mino Bimadswin is the thing that keeps you going in life, where you're making discoveries about things you didn't know, or making new discoveries about things you thought you know. And Mino Bimadswin is a commitment to the continual learning, to continue to find good heart and good spirit in your pathway. And so for me, reconciliation, that we don't have to feel stuck. We don't have to be stuck. If we commit to this, if we commit to Mino Bimadswin, we commit to continuing to be on a good journey, we will find something that inspires us again. We will find something that corrects our path if we've gone off the path. When you look at an eagle feather, there is a spine that runs down the middle of an eagle feather, okay? And on both sides of that spine are the feathers, the actual feathers that make up the eagle feather. What I'm told about life is that this eagle, this spine that runs down this eagle feather represents your life. And when you look at this feather and its two sides, it represents positive, negative, good and bad, wins and losses. Your job isn't to stay on the spine of the feather and to run this straight line. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to fall off. You're going to have wins. You're going to have losses. But your job is to try to stay centered, to find that journey of Mino Bimadswin. And the more of us that do that and commit to the good life, the better. Aha, miigwech, thank you. So I think we have about 10 or 15 minutes. No, we have about 5 or 10 minutes for questions. So if anyone has questions, is Zoom being opened up for questions? Yeah, there might be questions. There might be questions in the room. If not, I can go home. We have one question here in the room. Yeah, so I went to theater school um, out of high school, and I'm a classically trained actor. And I moved to Toronto in 1999 to chase my dreams of being an actor. And when I moved here, I didn't fit many roles. I don't look like a stereotypical Indigenous person that you see in the cowboy and Indian movies. So this being a visual medium, many casting agents didn't. I was classically trained, so I'm a good actor, but I wasn't castable in a lot of things that were being made at the time. So I started writing. And when I started writing, I discovered the Second City in Toronto. And I went to the conservatory there on a scholarship. And in 2002, went to New York City, auditioned for Saturday Night Live. A year after that, had my first baby. And then took some time off to raise my family as I stayed at home dad. And in 2010, I started writing stand-up. And when I started writing stand-up, I was living in Winnipeg. I got the great fortune of being on a CBC comedy stand-up special taping, and I did very well at it. And since 2010, I've been a full-time stand-up comic. So I travel around telling jokes sometimes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know why. I can't, I'm not a sociologist, and I think that any sociological phenomenon can't be applied to one group of people or another. But what I will say is like social indicators and different outcomes of failed policies and legislations force people into pretty desperate situations. And so in the case of Indigenous people, I think it's true that you might see increased numbers of alcoholism or the use or dependency on drugs and alcohol. But I don't know that it's specific to Indigenous people. We just get measured more than most. I joke that, you can go outside and you can find an Indigenous person laying under a tree having a beer. But if you were to walk into a Canadian Legion, you would find a white person sitting at the bar drinking a beer. So it's about where you look, and it's about what you're looking for and the lens that you choose to kind of frame that conversation in. I think that the current understanding that many people have is just that through decades of institutional neglect, failed policies, and everything else, it's absolutely destroyed lives. And I can tell you, as someone that is an alcoholic who has quit drinking and now abstains from all drugs and alcohol, I used it as a device to cope with surviving what I've survived in my life. And coming from where I come from, it was one of the tools that I used as a younger person to escape and to get away from problems. And later in my life became a negative influence, a bad part of my life that definitely brought me down a path that was not good. So I don't think there's a way to answer that question other than to say, I don't think it's an Indigenous phenomenon. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Your approach to reconciliation, I understood it. You're voicing the fear of assimilation on one hand.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, would your suggested alternative be giving more autonomy to the Indigenous nations and then negotiating on a nation-to-nation basis?
Yeah, I think like there are political mechanisms that could be used to empower Indigenous nationhood. So like on the highest level, like we're talking about constitutional talks, right? Looking at the Constitution and the way that transfer agreements, for example, are made to provinces, right? If we can make transfer agreements to provinces, we can make transfer agreements to Indigenous nations. these organizations where I come from, Grand Council Treaty 3, I consider that my government. Indigenous people across Canada have these organizations that already exist that I would argue maybe aren't for every region or territory. They might not be what they would consider their national government, but in order to do this, it would take like a pause on the status quo. I think that we should transformationally look at funding levels of different programs and services across Canada, concurrently building treaty tables and talks to have an ongoing convoy across this country to take the recommendations of Indigenous people and their nations to look at what those political frameworks might be. And then from there, you know, call it a 4-year process. I'm not saying it would take 4 years, but say if it was 4 years, at the end of 4 years, you have some sort of framework that is agreed upon by Indigenous nations and the government. And then you look at maybe committing to another 4-year process of looking at how you can make those types of transfer agreements between Indigenous nations and otherwise. I've written about this before, and I think that, I mean, political scientists think I'm right, but some of them go like, yeah, well, that would never happen. Well, we don't get to live in a world where we say, well, yeah, well, that would never happen. We have to live in a world where we radically imagine transforming the existing systems. And I think that that in this country, we can kind of tinker around the edges of the status quo and kind of incrementally look at an experiment here or there. But I think truly transforming that agreement between Canada and Indigenous nations will take a radical reimagining, and we have the mechanisms to do it. But we do not have the political will. Even in this room, I mean, probably in this room, people are like, I don't know about that. Imagine traveling across Canada and having Joe and Janet Canada in the middle of Saskatchewan somewhere going like, yeah, sign me up, sure. There's just, frankly, I'll stop this comment short of saying this, but there's just too much racism in this country and too much misunderstanding in this country to present radical transformative ideas like this to the body politic, because we're just not there yet. So I mean, probably won't see it in my lifetime, but I love thinking more about like what it could be. For now, we're told like Indigenous people should vote, and maybe if we had an Indigenous prime minister or something. No, none of that will move the chains, I can assure you. Yeah. It happened a minute. Wob's one of my best friends. We can talk about Manitoba all day long, and there's some good that's happening there for sure. But I think Indigenous people would argue that having an Indigenous premier might mean that some of the programs and services are more generously funded, but the transformative fundamental nature of the relationship is still the issue. Yes.
I have a question, but I don't find the button to raise my electronic hand. Please, if you allow me.
Yeah. Sorry, Mildred, just hold on for a sec. We'll
Okay.
take the question after. Mhm.
Yeah. There have been, since August 29th, there have been 7 Indigenous men killed by police in Canada. Yeah. I think Indigenous people's relationship to police is very complicated. I think that Indigenous peoples suffer disproportionate violence at the hands of police, often goes unreported. And I don't know how that can change. I think for me, making the TV series Thunder Bay, this is very difficult for me to say, But what I did walk away from that series with is an understanding of police officers and empathy for some police officers. They have an incredibly difficult job. With that being said, there are many police officers that are unwell, that have no business carrying weapons, that have no business keeping our community safe, that are not interested in keeping our community safe, and that frankly should not be police officers. And so I think I'll give you three answers. One, policing as a whole is broken. The culture of policing is broken. The police need mental health supports that they do not get. Mental health leave and PTSD is presumptive in the workplace with police, and I think with most emergency responders, meaning that it is presumed that if you are this for a living, you are going to have PTSD, and that just comes with your paycheck. The officers that I talked with suffer deep, deep emotional scars from dealing with rescuing people from burning buildings and picking up dead people off of a highway. So there are things that come along with the workforce that impact human beings, not police officers, human beings. Secondly, these people that are impacted that way are on the streets with guns every day and are not well. And if I'm not well and I work here, my boss would send me home and go, you need to go see your doctor. That is not encouraged in policing. So the culture of policing to me is the fundamental question. Thirdly, whether cops should be defunded or abolished or whatever, that is a community-based conversation. This community has to have it. Peel has to have it. We should all be having the conversations in our communities. It's dangerous to generalize that this is what the solution might be. I disagree with that solution as a prescription to do away with policing. I think that there are some communities that feel that their police are doing okay for them, given whatever policing is for them. But it's a very complicated relationship with Indigenous people and police. And yeah, I mean, I think everyone wrestles with how to do better. And for those of us that pay attention to the conversation in our different walks of life and our different professional fields, find some success or failures. The RCMP just massively failed, thinking they were doing the right thing by presenting this red ribbon skirt that they had designed by some Indigenous RCMP person. But red ribbon skirts are representative of MMIWG initiatives, and Indigenous women often are not searched for by RCMP. And so like the fact that they got it so wrong just means that they don't understand the problem. And I think that, again, the understanding piece is very deep and nuanced. And I think that there are spaces where they are going to have a harder time wrestling with these questions than others.
I have a question, if you allow me, please.
Thanks.
Yeah, Ryan, sorry, Mildred, online. Yes, Mildred, go ahead, please.
First of all, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mildred Jiminian, and I'm the CEO and founder of MJ New Commerce Solutions. We are a non-for-profit organization which operates from Toronto. Right now, I'm overseas in the Dominican Republic, but I want to take the opportunity to honor the land, Canada, the native land. And we recognize that we operate from the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credits, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, including the Inuits and Inuit peoples. I want to ask you, what is the best way to re-educate or decolonize the new immigrants that arrived to Canada that still are in the process of learning or unlearning the history of what is being, And also, how can we show the big love that we have for the land, Canada, that we recognize that it's a native land that has offered so much for everyone from the first generation of immigrants to today. So what would be the best practices for organizations like us to start showing that love, to connect through the spirit deeply, the way you are doing it with the storytelling today? And how can we encourage people to feel what I'm feeling right now, which is exactly the spirit of love and the wisdom that you are transmitting through your conversation? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. Where should I look? So I'm looking here, but that's not a camera.
Well,
So.
yeah, look,
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
right
to the
here.
front
Okay.
is good.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't, again, like, I think it's dangerous for anyone standing in front of a microphone to sort of prescribe answers to say, like, this is what you should do. But I encourage people that are trying to learn and understand to kind of just go back to the beginning. And I think that the best materials we have right now are the Truth and Reconciliation Commission materials. Most of the work coming out of the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation is available online. You can go through that material. It houses not just the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's things like 94 calls to action or the executive summary, which kind of breaks down at the high level, kind of the 101 of Canadian history and what has happened here. But the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation has all sorts of different materials that you can go through online, which will help you better understand not just what has happened like in the past, but what is happening now. And I think that the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation is probably one of the best primary sources for that type of information. I would encourage people that that are working with new immigrants to Canada, and for those folks that are just getting here, to just access the popular culture that is out there. There's music, there's poetry, there's comic books, there's all sorts of writing, there's film, there's podcasts, and to the best of their ability to try to work with that material, because I think that that material coming from artists and from people from all walks of life that have lived experience opens up a doorway that I think people otherwise wouldn't have considered. And I think that the way we actually build relationships and bonds together is we try to understand each other, and we try to look at, like, how we are similar versus, you know, how we're different. And so to me, storytelling, music, film, television, podcasts, art is the quickest way forward. And so I would offer that as sort of a work that people can be doing on their own. But the National Center for Truth and Reconciliation is a great source of information. There's a project that I did called Whose Land Is It Anyway? And Home on Native Land, which is a website that people can work through on their own. Maybe I'll send it your way and we can distribute it to partners and people interested. But it's 10 parts. It's really gentle learning about sort of the history of Canada and colonization here. There are tools online that I think people can access pretty easily.
I would love to receive that material to share with our Latin American immigrants, please. And I honor Canada so much. Thank you so much for everything.
Yes, well, thank you. Thank you for your question.
Ryan, there's just one more question in the chat, and the person does preface it by saying they're sorry if it is silly. But the question is, you use the phrase Canada needs to love us. Does that mean you don't consider yourself Canadian?
Oh, trick question. My identification, my legal identification, my Canadian passport, these are things I enjoy. Am I Canadian? Yes, I am Canadian. I am fundamentally Canadian. However, I am an Anishinaabe person first, and I'm specifically an Anishinaabe person from a particular place, and that place has a story and a history to itself. And so, you know, I love this country. I love Canada. I would like for Canada to respect my people as an autonomous peoples that have a rich history of language and culture, and connection to land, that has its own governance system, that pre-contact had its own economy and trade and way that we did things. And I would like to, for me, the project is to live a free and liberated life in our homelands. And so the project for me is to dream of a way that Anishinaabe people, Ojibwe people, Indigenous people generally across this country can live free and unencumbered lives here. And so if that means 100 years from now, the transformation is complete and there are 140 Indigenous nations that share borders with Canada, then maybe that's the project. If we never get there, I think it's worth trying. But today, my passport is Canadian, for sure. And I really enjoy having that passport and spending Canadian money and living in this great place. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Bonnie Hunter. I'm the Executive Director at Northern Community House, and what an amazing way to end an incredible hour and a bit. I think it says a lot that
Sorry, but Bonnie, could you use the mic, please?
Sorry. I was just saying, I think it's an amazing thing that over 60 people have stayed with us almost a half an hour over, because it was an amazing conversation and so rich. And thank you for sharing your stories and your humor and helping us unpack reconciliation and deal with decolonization, which for a lot of us is a real tough one to dig into. And I hope that we can all commit to, Bimatsuwin, if I got that even remotely right. I'd like to thank all of you who are in the room with us and all of you who are online with us for joining us today. And I want to thank Woodgreen Community Services, who have been our partner, and we wouldn't be able to have Ryan here with us today without their support. So thank you to them. And I want to thank Joan Frame, who's our Truth and Reconciliation Coordinator, for making this all happen, and all of you who worked on this event. So thank you so much. And Ryan, we hope to have you back. Thank you.